Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Live with Sandra V. Now, today our topic is going to be tips to getting better photos with your smartphones. Now, we all already know that our smartphones are our go-to for capturing that perfect shot, but all too often we seem to miss the mark, and maybe it is on lighting, or maybe it's angles, or but and I don't know about you, but many times I thought that I had that ideal setup, only to realize that a different position or knowing some of those special features on my phone would have helped me nail that shot, and maybe I would have had a magazine worthy photo. And we're also sold on the fact that our phone lenses, well, we're told that they outshine many DSLRs. And while that may be true, but the features, they're hidden and they remain a mystery to us. And how much time do we have on our hands to dive into there and explore? Most of us are too busy sewing or designing, right? Well, that's going to change today because with Linda's expertise, we're going to begin to unlock some of the potential that we hold literally in the palms of our hand. But before we dive into today's discussion, I want to reconnect and introduce myself to those I may not know. My name is Sandra Vansickle, and I bring over 4 decades, that's hard to say, of experience in the custom treatment industry. And I'm happy to say that I'm rewired, not retired. And I'm living out my goal of inspiring, educating, and promoting others in the industry who share my vision and my passion. And I will tell you that this platform is one of those ways that provides me with the opportunity to do just that. Now, today's session is planned for 1 hour, and during this time, I encourage you all to say hello to one another in the comments. Say hello to me, say hello to Linda, give Linda some love while you're here. And if you have any questions throughout our discussion, please, if you put a Q in front of your question, then we are able to kind of source them out and we can address them toward the end of our time together. Now, I see some of you coming in already, and it's good to have you all here. But now, we're going to have Linda's going to have a lot of information to tell you, so we're going to kind of start to jump into this. But before I do, I want to properly introduce Linda. Now, Linda Holt is a photographer turned interior designer turned smartphone photography educator. And as a former photographer, she has worked with more than 5,000 celebrities, actors, and models as one of Boston's top commercial headshot photographers. And after 25 years in the business, she closed her photography studio and enrolled in a design school. In 2011, she opened up Linda Holt Creative, offering full-service interior design. Now, if that isn't following your passion, I don't know what is. Now, Linda is also an expert in both smartphone photography as well as photo editing. She helps other designers and home interior coverings professionals, like some of us, master their smartphone photography skills. She is the creator of multiple online smartphone photography classes, including smartphone photography for interior designers, travel photography with the smartphone, and I know a lot of us out there travel a lot, and we always want that special shot, right? She is a sought-after speaker and podcast guest and teaches smartphone photography workshops throughout the country. Now, many of you may have even taken some of Linda's classes or workshops out there, or maybe you have seen her or met her at the High Point Market, Haven, the Atlanta Market, the Multifamily Unit Home Summit, maybe the Influencers of Midlife Conference, and KBIS. So, Linda, I want to welcome you to the live broadcast today. I mean, you are so talented. And I will say, before I turn it over to you real quick, that I have had many aha moments taking your training. And I was like, oh my gosh, if this was a benefit to me, not personally, but professionally, then it is others need to hear what you have to say and what you need to teach because I know you do a lot with interior designers, but in the our neck of the woods, the window fashions. I mean, we're out there too, and we're always, once our draperies are hung, we want that perfect shot, and it's a struggle. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm so excited to be here, and I really am truly passionate to share my knowledge with others that are, in the home industry because the smartphones really are amazing today and they really can get great shots. So, should I get started with the slideshow here?
Yes, I'm gonna switch
Okay.
you over to that, and you
Okay.
can just take it away, Linda.
All right. You tell me, can you see my screen?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. All right. So, during this presentation, I'm hoping to inspire all of you to take charge of your photos, and I'm going to show you how you can photograph window treatments to the best of your ability using your smartphone. So, specifically, what I want to cover this morning is how to use your smartphone more like a digital camera. And Sandra mentioned those hidden features. So, I'm going to expose a couple of them during this talk. I also want to talk about composition. And with smartphone photography, especially window treatments, it's really important to get straight lines. You don't want your clients thinking, oh, look at how crooked those window treatments are. And then finally, I'm going to just share sort of my top 3 tips for photographing window treatments. And this is just a little snippet of what my course on window treatments will have, but let's get started. So Sandra introduced me. I was a professional photographer for 25 years, went back to school in 2009, enrolled in interior design school, opened up my business in 2011. And that's on a personal note, so you can get to know a little bit of who I am. I'm a big animal lover, but specifically a dog person. I've always had dogs. We currently own one rescue dog now. His name is Nevers. And I'm passionate about travel, learning, and really good coffee. And I am the creator of multiple online smartphone photography classes. I am Linda Holt creative pretty much everywhere in the online world. I'm very responsive to texts, questions, DMs. I encourage you to follow me on Instagram. That's pretty much my primary source. And I give tips, once a week on smartphone photography. And the whole feed is pretty much geared towards smartphone photography. So it's just a great way to pick up a few tips. But I'm Linda Holt Creative pretty much everywhere if you need to reach me. So here's the big $64,000 question. Can you really get magazine worthy photos with your phone? Well, I'm hoping to convince you today that you absolutely can. And honestly, smartphone cameras have become so good and so smart that I personally know several professionals that have switched over to shooting their jobs with their smartphone, and they are ditching their big, bulky digital cameras. And I've had friends say to me, professionals, I always use my digital camera because I think it looks good for the client, but then I also shoot everything with my smartphone, and half the time I'm sending them the smartphone photos because they look better. So the smartphones, especially the new ones, they are little geniuses. So just to put this in perspective here, I think this is a really interesting slide. The blue line is the sale of digital cameras, which kind of reached its peak around 2011. And that is at the same time when smartphone cameras started getting really good. And where they intersect is ironically the exact year I switched over from using my digital camera to my smartphone. So you can see the sales of smartphones versus the sales of digital cameras. So that should tell you something. All right, so here is the reality. After I got out of design school and started designing, just getting even before photos, and I'm using my smartphone, and the reason was I had to literally put down my heavy equipment for good because I had terrible debilitating neck and spinal issues, which I won't go into that story, but I could no longer lift up the digital camera, or I was told I would be facing spinal fusion surgery. It was that bad. However, using my smartphone, I thought, oh, I'm a very accomplished photographer. This should be a breeze. Well, here was my early photos, just to put this in reality. They were terrible. They were embarrassingly bad because I was used to looking through, a digital camera, holding it up to my face, looking through a viewfinder. Then I had this thing in my hand. There was no lights came with it. There were no instructions. So I quickly learned using it as a point and shoot was not going to give me magazine quality photos. So I started hiring out and I was hiring out professionals and I was paying $3,000, $5,000 for a photo shoot. I live in Boston, it's expensive. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I can do this, but I can't use a digital camera. So I went on this quest to figure out the smartphone camera and really to crack the code. And today I'm more than proud to show you my shots. I shoot all my own interiors. I really have figured it out. And you know what? It's really not that hard. So let's get started with a few tips so you can have shots that look as good as this. So the first thing I want to talk about is a couple of the hidden features and how you can use your smartphone more like a DSLR camera or digital camera. And the two things I want to talk about is that you should really get in the habit or at least understand how to set the exposure and the focus manually. And then I also want to talk out about the power of switching and using portrait mode for things other than portraits. So I'm going to address both the iPhone and the Android. So this is not phone specific because I know people have all kinds of phones, but I want to first explain how you can set the exposure manually if you own an iPhone. And there's two ways. The first way is you can tap your finger on the screen in the exact place where you want the in-camera light meter to set the exposure. So in other words, in this photo here, this was out in the hallway at High Point. It was a dark area under the bench here. So I tapped and said, expose here. Now, presumably it will do a great job and the exposure will be perfect. But if it isn't, you can also tap and hold your finger anywhere on the screen. It doesn't have to be where you want to set the exposure. It can be in the middle, it can be anywhere. And you hold it there until you see this yellow box with a sun icon appear. By sliding your finger up the screen, you will brighten the overall image. And if you slide your finger down the screen, you will darken the overall image. So let me just quickly show you the progression here. This is the photo my phone took right out of the camera, point and shoot. I did not set the exposure. You can see, because it was a dark hallway, the iPhone, which is what I think I used for this shot, although I used both an iPhone and a Samsung, it's too dark. And I wanted to show my client, I love the curve on this bench. And this was a major feature, but it doesn't look very appealing. It's too dark. So I tapped right here, waited for the box and the sun icon, slid my finger up the screen to get it to the desired exposure or brightness that I wanted. And here was the final photo that I took and that I sent to my client. So simply by overriding the in-camera light meter, which is this image all the way over to the left, which is too dark, sliding my finger up the screen, exposing it so I thought it looked good or brightening it up, I got a much better image. Now, it's almost the exact same function if you own an Android. This is specifically the screen of a Samsung, but it's the same on the Pixel or the LG. And rather than seeing the yellow box with a sun icon on the Android, you're going to see a white circle with a little sun below it. And in this case, you slide your finger to the right to brighten the image, or you can slide your finger to the left to darken the image. So basically, it's the same thing. You can also tap your finger anywhere on the screen where you want the in-camera light meter to expose. But if you want further control, tap and hold, slide your finger to the right, slide your finger to the left. Now, I'm also going to in a few slides, we're going to talk about manually setting the focus. I want you to remember this slide if you have a Samsung. You can see here, it's a white circle with a white lock that looks like it's unlocked. And over here, it's turned yellow and the lock is now closed or locked. So just remember that because I'm going to be addressing that in a minute. You want to manually set the exposure, especially when you're shooting an interior, because I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, what is going to happen is the in-camera light meter, you're shooting window treatment. So there's no way of getting around that you're going to be pretty much facing a window or the window is going to be somewhere in the shot. And the outside light, even if it's a dark day, even if it's raining, is still going to be brighter than your inside light because you do not want to have lights on in the interior when you're shooting. So this is how the camera exposed it. The light meter was picking up this brighter outside light, and this was very early in the morning. This was probably around, well, maybe it was like 8:39, but the outside light was so much brighter that the camera said, "Oh, we got to decrease that light. It's too bright," which caused the interior, everything, the drapery, to go to dark. So simply by tapping my finger on the screen, and this again is the iPhone, sliding my finger up the screen, this is the image that I took. So you can see, again, I just want to drive home the point that by manually setting the exposure, you can go from a poor shot to a magazine quality shot. So simple, but so many people I have found do not know how to use this hidden feature. Now, let's move on, and I want to talk about manually setting the focus. It's the exact same function as if you're trying to set the exposure. But when you set the focus, don't worry about, you want to tap on what you want in sharp focus. So let's start with the iPhone over here. So you can't really see this because it doesn't hold for me long enough to get a screenshot of this. But I wanted this plant in the foreground, this flower arrangement, to be in sharp focus. I didn't care so much about the background. So when you tap and hold, you will see the yellow box and the sun icon, and you can adjust the exposure up or down, but then you hold your finger and the box is going to start to blink. When it stops blinking up in the black border, you will see a yellow banner here, and the banner will say AEAF lock. What that means is the auto exposure and the auto focused is now locked. So it's okay that the background is blurry. I wanted to lock focus on this flower arrangement. With the Samsung, it's the same thing, but it is a yellow circle. The white circle, when the focus is locked, will turn yellow. And that little lock that I showed you 2 slides back, the white lock will lock and turn yellow. So again, I wanted sharp focus on this Chinese pot here. It's okay. I didn't care about the background going soft. You can see it's very a little bit blurry and soft. So why worry about the focus? Well, I think as window treatment professionals, you are the one that have the most, it's most important for you to lock the focus. Let's say you're photographing a long family room and you want to get the whole room in to show your beautiful window treatments that are way at the back of the room. If you just, set the exposure and you don't lock the focus, you don't know where the camera is going to think the focus should be. So it may focus somewhere in the middle of the room. It may choose to focus in the foreground. Chances are it's not going to focus in on the background. But if you tap your finger on the window treatments way in the back of the room, that is what is going to be in sharp focus. And maybe the foreground falls off a little bit in focus, but that's okay. You want to show your window treatments. They are what you want to put in your portfolio. Same thing. Let's say you're photographing that same family room and the window treatments, you've gotten that photo, but now you wanted the whole room, but you really want this beautiful custom designed pillow that you worked so hard on that's in the foreground to be sharp and clear. And it's okay if the rest of the room falls off a little bit in focus. So you would just tap your finger, hold it till the yellow box blinked and you saw the yellow indicator, or that circle, if you have a Android, turns yellow and locks. So you can have full control over what is in focus. And it's very helpful because if you are not using a tripod and you're just hand holding your phone and you're shooting an interior, which generally tends to have a little bit lower light anyway, even if you're not quite steady and your hand is slightly shaking, wherever you lock the focus, it will be sharp as a tack. So focus and exposure. Think about every time you're shooting a project, those, if nothing else, you really want to take control over that and not allow the camera to set the exposure or set the focus. Now, the second thing you can do to kind of mimic that you're using a digital camera is smartphones have come up with this genius thing called portrait mode. And I use portrait mode all the time. And I rarely shoot portraits, so I'm not using it when I'm shooting people. But portrait mode will blur your background and it will draw attention to your subject or the foreground, which is your beautiful drapery that you've worked on. And the thing about portrait mode, it's the same thing. It's going to look like you took the shot with a digital camera because to get this shot in the past, a smartphone couldn't do this. A smartphone focuses pretty much everything foreground, midground, background. This would be what a if you hire a professional with a digital camera, they're going to take off one lens, the normal lens, and they're going to put on a telephoto lens, and they're going to get way far back from their subject. Then they're going to focus in on what they want, the subject, the window treatment. The background will be blurry. But smartphones, by just simply switching to portrait mode, it absolutely looks like it was taken with a digital camera. And again, for window treatment professionals, I think you can use this a lot. So when you're shooting a detail shot of perhaps the leading edge, if there's some decorative trim or whatever, you don't need to see all the distraction outside the window because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be cars or a parking lot or another building. So, this here would have been a really good situation to just switch over to portrait mode because you don't need to see all of this distracting background. And then you could just really focus in on the drapery, which is what you want to show anyway. All right, so moving on, and I want to talk about composition because what's most important with composition is getting straight lines. And this can be very challenging when you're using a smartphone, and I'll explain why. The smartphone, the even if you have one of the newer ones and you'll have 3 lenses, a wide angle, the normal lens, and the telephoto. But in general, if you're shooting with that normal default lens, that is comparable to a very wide angle lens on a digital camera. It is actually like a 26 millimeter lens. And if you have a newer phone, they've made them even wider. And now the new iPhone 14 and 15 both have 24 millimeter lenses. So what that means is it's a wide angle lens. The normal lens is a wide angle. The wide angle is actually an ultra wide angle. So when you have a wide angle lens, you are going to have converging or diverging lines. In other words, you're going to have bending lines. There's 2 ways you can sort of minimize this. The first way is you want to hold your phone correctly. And I will tell you, most people are not holding their phone correctly when they're shooting an interior. And number 2, you want to turn on and use your in-camera grid because that will be a little guide to just kind of help you to know if your phone is held correctly. So, how do you want to hold your phone? You always want to hold your phone if you're shooting an interior on the same level as what you are photographing. So, if you take a look at the image on the left here, this is what not to do. I'm holding my phone where most people hold it, which is up high chest level because I'm looking at the back of the screen. But what I'm shooting is down lower than me. What am I doing? I have to tip my phone downward. The moment you tilt your phone downward or upward, you're going to get wonky perspective and lines. So when you point your phone downward, you're going to have wide, it's going to start wide and the lines are going to bend inward. So you can see the problem here. It looks like a very amateur, it looks like a cell phone shot versus this one, which looks like it was taken by a professional. The only difference is in this shot, I held my phone down at about waist level and it was perfectly straight. It was on the same plane as this little vignette, this furniture vignette that I was photographing. So again, image on the left does not look very magazine worthy. Image on the right looks like it was taken with a digital camera. All I did was hold the phone correctly. Now, oftentimes when you're shooting window treatments, you're tipping your phone upward, especially if you have like some 10-foot, 12-foot ceilings. We don't have a lot of that here where I am in Boston, but I know for those of you that are in Texas or the South, you have massive homes. So you're tipping your phone upward to get the shot. One way you can deal with that is get back as far as possible. You will still have some perspective problems, but it won't be as bad as if you get in close and tip upward. So, one little aid that all cameras have, doesn't matter what phone or what model you have, is it has an in camera grid. And if you don't have your grid turned on, you definitely want to go in and turn it on. It's very easy. You just go into your settings on your camera, scroll down to find camera. Click on camera, and when the next window opens, usually it's under composition, you just toggle on the grid. And you want to keep the grid on. Now, the grid lines is what this photo here on the left looks like. It's a series of horizontal and vertical lines. It will not be on your finished print or image. This is just a screenshot of what the grid looks like. Once you have the grid, you can line up one of these horizontal or vertical lines to something in your image that you know is horizontal or vertical. So when I'm an interior, I will oftentimes use, the edge of drapery, or I'll use a bookcase, or I'll use a window frame or molding or anything that I know is horizontal or vertical. And I try to match up as many areas as I can. It's going to be hard to match them all up. That's not going to happen. But even if you can get one or two lines lined up, that's a pretty good indicator that your phone is held and not tipping upwards or downwards. And then moving on, I just want to share three quick tips for photographing window treatments. And the most important tip of all is to time your shoot. I also want to talk about HDR and then the importance of not forgetting those detail shots. So this is the most important thing when you are shooting your window treatments is you really do want to time your shoot, and you want to shoot with natural light. So you want to be in the room when the light in the room looks bright but is still even. In other words, you don't have hard sunlight streaming through the window. This is going to be an impossible situation to ever photograph window treatments. You just can't do it. So when if you aren't in the home ahead of time, ask the homeowner, what is a good time of the day when the room doesn't have hard sun coming through the window? Generally, it's early morning or late afternoon, but just try not to get there to do the treatment when the light is coming through the window. Because if you are trying to shoot that, and many of you have probably experienced this, when the outside light is really strong and you're facing into the window, what happens? You're going to get super bright window light. Even if you set the exposure manually, you're going to have lower inside light and strong outside light. And if you try to do this, you're still going to get like lens flare from this. It's really strong backlighting is nearly an impossible way to shoot a window treatment, because you can either expose for the highlights or the shadows, but neither is going to make a good photo. So in this case, I tapped on the shadow area, which is the drapery itself. But so that is okay. But the outside light is so bright that it's wrapped itself around and totally made a mess of this. And if instead I tap my finger and expose for the outside light, then obviously you know what's going to happen. The inside light is going to be way too dark. Now, if you have a situation where, you can't time your shoot, maybe you can choose a time of the day where the sun is bright, but it's on the opposite side of the window that you're photographing, which was this case. So if you look at this image, you can see the sun is on the other side of the house because it's hitting this house that is across the way here. So in this case, the image is actually facing west. You can see the sun is like in the east, but it's facing west. So this is going to be when the room is, still bright enough, but it's still daytime, but you're not having the sun coming through the window. And when you're shooting, Romans like this, you do want to shoot straight on generally to show your beautiful work. But usually, in general, again, a good time of the day to shoot window treatments is when the outside light is low or lower, which is usually early morning, late afternoon, or on a rainy day. Now, the second thing you can do, and this is if you have an older model. So if your phone is more than 2 or 3 years old, you want to go into settings and make sure HDR is turned on. HDR stands for high dynamic range. And what HDR does is it balances the very high contrast between the very, very bright outside light and the much lower inside light. If you have a new phone, one that's been purchased within the last couple of years, you do not have to turn on HDR. All the newer phones, the current models within the last couple of years, have what is called smart HDR, and you have no control over it because the camera will automatically switch to HDR when it senses a very contrasty lighting situation. To know if you have smart HDR, you can just go into settings. And if you don't have an option to turn it on HDR, then you have smart HDR. If you have to go in, if you have an older phone and turn on HDR, this photo here was taken with HDR on. And I showed you how bad the previous ones were without HDR. This was taken with like an iPhone 6. But what it's done is how HDR works. It takes 3 photos in rapid succession. It takes a photo that's underexposed, it takes a photo overexposed, and it takes sort of a quote, a normal photo. And it stitches instantly the 3 photos together to give you a presumably one really good shot. And it makes a huge difference. But if you go in and you have to turn on HDR, you have to remember to go in and turn it off because it is taking 3 photos and stitching them together. If you forget to turn it off and then you're shooting something where it's still on and it doesn't need to be on, you're going to get a blurry photo. So just make note, HDR, if you have to turn it on, go in and turn it off. But if you have a new phone, you don't have to worry. The phone is very smart. It will turn it on when it senses this contrasty light. As soon as you're done, it will turn it off. And then the last tip I want to give you, and I think so many people forget to shoot the detail shots, get in close. If you're shooting your window treatments for social media specifically, um, the public is looking at social media or your feed on their phone. So you have a little 2-inch square of real estate to show them your photo and your workmanship. So do get in close. The people love to see photos, that really shows off the work up close. Keep the big room shots that show your beautiful window treatments in the room, maybe for Facebook, which is a little bit bigger, or certainly for your portfolio. But for Instagram, don't forget these close up detail shots because they're so easy to shoot. And detail shots, honestly, is where the smartphone shines. It can really outshine even a digital camera because it just does the exposure perfectly. It's so sharp. You can just get such a beautiful image. And the workmanship, just show off all these fine details of the hard work that you put into making these. And then my last final tip is one that can make an absolute huge, huge difference in the quality of your images. And it's probably the easiest tip I can give you. And it is the one thing that I know without a doubt 90% of people don't do. Clean your lens. People just forget to do it. They don't even know they're supposed to do it. Think of where we have our phones. We have it in the cup well of our car. We have it down the bottom of our bag. We have it on our kitchen counter when we're cooking. The lenses get greasy, grimy, dirty. And so you really need to get in the habit, maybe even just once a month. Or if you have eyeglasses, every time you clean your eyeglasses, just think, oh, I'm going to do my camera at the same time. So this way, at least you will know you are starting off with a nice, sharp lens. So you're ahead of the game because when I do public speaking, I always ask for a show of hands of who cleans their camera lens on a regular basis. And I will tell you, I will see maybe 2 hands, maybe 3 out of an audience of 100. So I know people forget to do this. So that is my final tip. Get in the habit of cleaning your lens. And I hope everybody enjoyed this and learned a little bit more. So I'll go back to you, Sandra.
Yeah, so thank you, Linda. That I have learned some other tips today too. And
Good.
I am just so, so impressed, and I'm so glad that you covered, that part of taking, the photos facing, the windows. And like I said, I
Mhm.
think, in the window treatment industry, of course, that's what we focus on.
Yes.
And we'll get in there, and that's what we want to take. And I think sometimes we forget to move back a little bit more.
Yep,
And
yep.
that tip, I tell you, showing that little armoire that you had there, side, the buff, what did you call it? With an armoire or a little dresser?
That
But
little chest of drawers thing,
Chester,
yeah.
what a difference that makes too. Is we're trying to get a good shot, and we're always in. Well, I'm always in a hurry. It seems like,
Yeah,
and right away we snap it. And I never thought about um, that when we're kind of looking down, you don't think about what happens to that photograph.
right.
So that is, just really amazing. Um, and so true. I about the close up photographs and the details. I think,
Yes.
and for many of you that are out there, I know that you all must post on social media and Instagram. And if have you ever kind of tracked what um, uh, what photos you get the most comments on? And I know if I post anything about fabrics, whew, everyone's loves it,
Yeah.
but it's those fine details that we want to see, and
And that's what you
so
work so hard on. Many of you are
right,
hand sewing those details, and that's why they're custom, and it really shows their audience like, "Oh my gosh, look at that." I mean,
yeah,
that's just beautifully made, and
how's
it
that
kind of
done?
it
Yeah,
kind of like gives value to why you charge what you charge because look at the detail I put into this.
exactly, exactly. I want to switch over to the comments because I know we've had some come up here, and here, let me go here. I
Oh,
don't know
share
why
my
I have this
just between my
huge
lamp.
big arrow here, but people came in saying good morning to
Yeah.
everyone. And I said, I want my photos to look like yours.
They
And
can, they can.
Sharon said, well, thank you, Linda. And then Nelson has, is it Callie Nelson or Nelson Callie? Anyway, any tips on organizing your photos?
I put everything into a folder. I have many folders. I do it all on my phone. I then occasionally I will upload everything to the computer, but I do folders, and I do folders for each project. So if I'm going to somebody's home, the day one, I do all the before photos. I start a folder for them on my phone, and I just every time I take a go back for updates or whatever, I dump all those photos into that folder. And then when I'm
Oh,
totally done with the job, I can then upload them if I want to keep them. I can delete I can do whatever I want. But folders for me or in your album is the best way to stay organized.
yeah. That way you don't have like 15,000
And
photos all the time.
sometimes, I mean, you can also, besides each job, you can make a folder for trim. Maybe your beautiful put everything in a folder that's trim, or everything in a folder that's Roman shades, or everything in a folder that's blue drapery. I mean, who knows if you're writing blog posts? So to stay organized, the more folders, the more organized you'll be.
That's good idea. Yeah. And Sharon said she just cleaned
Yeah,
her lens. I do mine too. It's so funny. I clean my glasses every morning. I wipe mine off. Veronica said, "Thank you, great info." She learned a couple new tips. And Julie
good.
has a question. She says, "My smart HDR is toggled on. Should she turn it off?"
If it is smart HDR, you want to keep it on because it's smart. It will know when to turn it off. If it just says HDR in your settings, absolutely turn it off.
Okay.
If it's smart HDR, you want it on because you want it to activate when it should, and it will because it is smart. It will know when to not use it. So
Mm-hmm.
just leave it on.
Mm-hmm. And then Sharon said she got her yellow box.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
it wasn't working, but she got it working. I
Oh,
think.
oh, okay, good. Yeah, yeah,
And then Lori said, brilliant tips, thank you. And Julie Power said, thank you. It's good,
good.
yeah. And what else? And also, um, I was looking at some of your photos too that you had out there. And one of the things that I think I do is that I don't think is right is that I always want to center everything.
Mhm.
And I looked at some of your photos, and it's like it's okay to step to the side a little bit or come to a different angle. What's your thought?
I have a whole in my course, I talk a lot about that. There's different ways to photograph it. You can certainly photograph it straight on, but there are going to be times where you're not going to get a good shot. It's too bright, whatever. Everyone everyone I'm sure has struggled with that bright outside and not being able to get a good shot. So I talk about the different angles in my course of when would you want to photograph it this way and um you know there's depending what you're going to use the photos for. If it's going to be for your installer, you're going to want to shoot something different than if it's going to be for your portfolio.
Mhm.
Everyone is going to, there's different angles. So I do address all that in the class, but you do not have to stand right in front of the window, smack center, and get that forward shot every single time. I think
Yeah.
you should try and get that shot, but I think before you leave that job, there's lots of other shots you need to take, different angles, different positions, and
Mhm.
different details.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Julie. She said, should lights be on when photographing window treatments?
Absolutely not. And again, I talk about this extensively in my class, and even what to do if you don't have enough light in the room. I talk about, how easy it is to bring in supplemental lights, but you don't want the lights on in the room because whatever temperature light bulb is in that light that's in the room, whether it's overhead or table lamps or floor lamps, you're going to get a color cast. And you're going to get, if it's a warm bulb, which most homes have, you're going to get like this yellowy, goldy cast that will change the white balance of the room. It will make the fabric look different than it looked. It will just add an overall color shift that you will then have to go into editing and fix the white balance. When if you just turn the lights off, you don't have to deal with that. Plus, when your lights are on, you're going to get shadows. So you don't want to have that contrasty. Think of inside lights the same way you think of the sun. They are hard lights. And
Mhm.
not only are they going to cast shadows, but they're going to give you that color shift. So you always, always, always want to turn off the lights.
Oh, that's a good tip. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, what about if we've taken and you probably cover this in your class, and I'm just going to ask, but if we take a photo and we've left the client's home, or it doesn't, we're being client specific, I guess, for today, but you've taken the photo and you've gone home and you're going, I know I captured that was perfect, and then I get into there and like, it's not. And what about the editing? Is it? You want to talk about that?
Editing is the third component of getting good photo. You want to have good lighting, you want to have a good composition. You cannot skip the editing. There is not a professional photographer on the planet that doesn't edit their photos. In fact, most professionals, I will be tell you the truth, they spend more time in post-production editing their photos than they even did taking the photo. And with window treatments and interiors, there's no way you can get away without editing because no matter how careful you are, you're going to want to go in and maybe boost the contrast a little bit, or maybe boost the saturation a little bit, or correct some perspective lines. It's very easy to do, but you definitely want to get in the habit of editing your photo so it looks, because editing, there's, it's so easy. I do all my editing on my phone and I edit
I was going to ask you that.
professionally for other designers who send me photos and they just are too busy to edit, and it literally is so easy. And I think I mentioned earlier, Sandra, before we came on, I am like the most non-tech person on the planet, and I figured it out. Excuse me. And the two that I'll share the two editing phone apps that I use. Now, if you're already using an editing app that you love, and you're using Lightroom or Photoshop, just keep using it. But if you aren't editing, you don't know anything about editing, I recommend downloading Snapseed. It's a free app by Google, works on both Android and iPhone. Excuse me, let me just take a quick sip of water here. And within literally seconds, you can correct the three, the major problems your phone is going to have, such as maybe it's even though you adjusted the exposure, maybe you want to lighten it even more, or Maybe you did the best you could with holding your phone, but the perspective is still a little bit off. You can fix perspective. Um, Maybe the window treatments look a little dull and you want to boost that saturation so it looks more like the fabric actually looked. Maybe the color is a tiny percent off, a tiny bit off. Maybe it was just a cool day outside and so everything in the room looks a little cold. Maybe you want to just boost the temperature of the room a little bit, not changing the color shift, but just making it look like it really does in real life. And then the other app that I use is one called Touch Retouch. And I like that one because that does one thing and one thing only. It removes unwanted objects in your image. So let's say you're doing maybe an update, or maybe even you're there when the installer is hanging your window treatments and you want to get a photo, and he's like stepped out of the scene and you point and shoot. You get home and you realize that maybe there was like a screwdriver or something left, a drill in the corner of the room that you missed. You can just take your finger and trace over whatever you want to remove, hit the apply button, and it will disappear.
Oh,
So
wow.
between those two apps, I do all my editing with those two apps. I don't have any other app but those
Wow.
two.
Yeah. Sharon asked, was that Snapseed? Snapseed. Yeah. You said Snapseed.
Yep. It's
Mm-hmm.
Snapseed. It's
Mm-hmm.
free. You can just download it right on your phone.
Okay.
Spend a couple minutes playing around with it, and you'll be an expert.
And Lori said, lights on shows the wrinkles.
It does.
Yeah.
It show
Yeah.
in the window treatments, it will show, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
contrasty, hard lighting,
Yeah.
and we know how we look if we go out in noontime sun. Oh my gosh, nobody wants their face photographed in noontime sun with those raccoon eyes, and
That's
every
true.
single line will have
Yeah.
black shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, drapery, think of it the same way. You want beautiful, smooth drapery. You don't
Mm-hmm.
want, wrinkles showing or imperfections showing, and you don't want hard lighting from the
Yeah.
lights being left on.
And Karen asked, what are the apps again?
Snapseed and Touch Retouch.
Touch, retouch. Okay. Now, the other question I have for you, uh, Linda, is once we go in and we take the photos and then we go in and edit them, how does that change like the pixelation of them? You know, if we want to use them for,
Mhm.
well, I guess it's okay for social media, but what
Yep.
happens if we want to submit something to a magazine? How does
Yeah,
that?
it's totally fine. The new phones have very high megapixels. Like the brand new iPhone is 48 megapixels. And
Wow.
back when I was still working as a professional photographer, my digital camera, the last one I owned, and I had stuff published constantly in magazines and things like that. Get this, it was 8 megapixels. And now we have 48 megapixels. So
Oh,
there's no problem with editing and submitting it. For publication. It's totally fine.
okay, that's good to know. Are there any other questions out there from y'all? I know there's always a little bit of a delay.
I
Uh,
You can ask me anything if you want to know about, whatever.
yeah, let's wait and see if there's any other questions that pop up here. But this is great. This is, I think what we need, and like I just want to remind everybody too that in your emails that you'll get one more email from me, and of course, again, there's links to her website. Go and explore everything on her website and all her different classes that she has, and follow her on social media because she's always giving tips. I was on there last night or today and saw all the different tips that you had, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Oh,
So,
the photo myths.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the myth. I love that. That was just really great.
I do
Um,
something called Tuesday tips. So every Tuesday,
oh,
I
okay,
do a really cute, really quick
yeah,
30-second tip, not necessarily related to window treatments, but related to anything smartphone
yeah,
photography wise.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you do this. But I hope that all of you have learned a lot from Linda today and that you, like I said, you will go ahead and you will follow her. And hold on, let me go back to the comments really quick because I went over and under you can see Donna Cash is like, everyone says wonderful information and Sharon's busy downloading apps and Donna Cash said, Linda, I watched your presentation for the WCAA, and you mentioned something about a dedicated optical zoom times two for better quality photos. Will you explain this again? She just got the 15 Pro and she loves it.
Sure. Okay, so if you have three lenses, you only know if you have that. You have to turn your phone over, and if you have those three holes, you have three lenses. One is a very wide angle. One is the wide angle. Yep, which is actually the normal default lens. So every time you open up your camera, it opens up to that normal default lens. If you have the third lens, you have a telephoto lens. And depending what camera you have, what year you have, what model you have, it's either going to be a 2X, a 3X, or if you have the new iPhone Pro Max, you actually have a new 5X. So that is called a designated optical zoom. So what that means is it's just like you had a digital camera. You take off one lens and you put on a long lens. It's called an optical lens because it is switching lenses. So what the camera, your phone does when you click on the 2X or the 3X or the 5X or whatever your telephoto power is it will switch from the normal default lens to that designated optical zoom lens. Now, what I talked about with a WCAA is not to confuse the designated optical zoom lens with digital zoom. What digital zoom is when you have your normal lens on and you're shooting and you take your fingers and you pinch out and you blow up what you're photographing. People think they're zooming in. All you're doing when you do digital zoom, which is pinching out with your fingers, is blowing up the pixels and destroying the shot. So never ever pinch out with your fingers and do what we call digital zoom. Always use your optical zoom. And when you're shooting window treatments, the farther back you can get from the window treatments, the better your shots are going to be. You will not have as many perspective problems. The closer you get, the more your lines will bend. So if you have the 3X lens, a 2X, or even probably the 5X is going to be two telephoto, but even get back to the doorway or the hallway or anything and shoot those window treatments with the longest lens you can. You will find you will have less perspective problems.
Very good information and good question, Donna. Thanks, Ian. And she said now she remembers.
Good, good.
So good. Well, this has been great. I have heard something about that in the past too, and I forgot about it because it makes sense. You're just kind of pinching in, and you're just
Yeah.
blowing it up.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
think they're zooming in. It is not. So always remember, zoom with your feet, not with your fingers. Getting closer, getting closer rather than pinch out. Um, so that if you want good photos.
Yeah, that's great information. We're all going to be professionals, and I want to see everyone's photographs out there
Yes, and
on.
tag me on
Yeah,
Instagram. I
yeah,
love
tag her.
seeing people's
Tag me
photo
too so I can
photos.
see them. Yeah, because I want to see them. All right, this has been wonderful. Well, again, want to make sure that everyone follows Linda on all her social media channels and go on over to her website. And like I've mentioned before, for those of you who have registered, which you all have for this live event, you can expect an email um, with access to Linda's offer on how to photograph window treatments with the smartphone. And you'll receive the replay for today so you can come back and watch it if you'd like to. And also, I'm going to be sending out where you'll have the information about some of the upcoming events that we have going on. And the I'm reading comments and I shouldn't do that as I'm talking, but we have the Craft Your Creative Life Retreat. It is a sewing business and wellness retreat being held in Lake Lure, North Carolina this September. You'll have information you can click on and learn more about that. We would love to have you. Space is very limited. We're having great classes. We're having some eco printing where we have a woman coming to teach us how to take leaves and flowers and plants to print on silk. Then we will have smocking and French mattress. And Donna Cash is here out there in the audience today, is going to be there with her wellness program. Anyway, it's going to be wonderful. And there's more information about that And then in March, you will find myself along with Kim Shagnon from Kim's Upholstery and Donna with Cash with Designed by Donna. Will be at her place with a fun 3-day workshop on lampshades and lampshades and lampshades, along with pillows and zippers. And we would love to have you there. And also, don't forget about the International Windows Covering Expo, which will be taking place in Texas next year. Gaylord, I think it's Grapevine, Texas. It's going to be in April. And we'd love to have you. And I don't know, many of you know what the Artisan Atelier is. It's a big booth that I'm a director of, and we have ongoing complimentary education on the exhibit hall floor, and we would love to have you there. And lastly, I would love it if you all would mark your calendars. Can you believe for next year, January 17th, not far away, I will be back here demonstrating how to laminate fabrics for a roller shade. So watch out for the post on social media, and I'll probably send you all some links for that as well. But I can't believe the holidays are upon us
Oh,
already. So, okay, there are a couple of thank yous. And yes, this will be recorded. Like I said, you will get the link in the email. And Julie said thank you, and she really enjoyed this
oh,
broadcast.
thank you so much, everyone. I'm
And,
really, thank you. Really appreciative that Sandra asked me on today. So
and
grateful
glad
for
you
all of
came.
you for listening in.
Yeah, great. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next year on Live with Sandra V. Have a good one. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.